welcome to another Thursday episode of the 905 podcast and the 905 Roundup. My name is Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And this week we're welcoming a third guest to our Roundup table, Alan Can, who is a political activist and longtime resident of Mississauga, who writes a newsletter called Muni-Poly Matters. We'll include the link for everybody in our show notes, and is very familiar and knowledgeable about Peel and Mississauga in particular. So we thought we'd welcome Alan on this week to because there's quite a bit of news happening in Mississauga and Peel at the moment. So I mean, Alan, obviously the big story, which we've addressed a bit, but we're kind of aware that we're not as knowledgeable about the kind of background to everything, is the story in Mississauga with this vandalism of a councillor's car. What's been your take on this whole story and what it kind of says about Mississauga Council?
Hi, Roland, Joel. Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I've a long-time listener, first-time participant, I guess.
That's great.
I guess that's how should acknowledge that. I guess in terms of this topic, this issue, you've covered it a bit briefly on your podcast, I think last week or so. But I won't regale the details. But if maybe I can add a few things in later. My take on it is very interesting. For the longest time, dating back to the days of Hazel McCallion, there was this idea that Mississauga City Council worked very collegially. It was always like, we speak with one voice, right? Council meetings always went by very quickly because there was a lot of unanimous decision. And current Mayor Bonnie Crombie, she's been repeating it in the media, even as this latest controversy unfolded, saying, by and large, our council works very well together and everybody, gets along, quote unquote. Well, obviously, there was an issue that ended up causing such a rift, or it caused something to happen that this councillor by the name of Ron Starr, who represents Ward 6 in Mississauga, went on to vandalize another councillor's car. And it kind of gives a pause to the idea that this council works so well together all the time, because now people are wondering, why exactly did he do this? Something must have happened that led to this man allegedly doing this, whether it was a political issue on council, whether it was something personal, that needs to be addressed. And so far, because of a lot of layers of legal and privacy issues, all these discussions have been taking place behind in-camera private meetings, so the public is not aware of the reasoning behind this. Now, as far as we know now, based on current developments, the Integrity Commissioner, Robert Swayze, has said he will now launch an investigation immediately as of a week ago from this recording of the pod, and that he will now do an investigation on his own. I think the position was previously the Integrity Commissioner could not take a position or do an investigation because it was a police matter at that point. But now it seems that the police are not going to continue an investigation further. So now the IC has said he's going to do an investigation. Councillor Starr himself, after attending Peel Regional Council apparently last week, a day after he was asked to go on a leave of absence, has now said he will step back from all city and regional meetings to respect the process, as he said, while this investigation unfolds. And that's approximately where it's been left at. But just going back to my point, it just raises this question of, has, this council for decades, no matter who sat on it, I mean, some of these people have been around since the last century, and they said they all work very well together. Well, something like this has happened now. And
a question comes to my mind. I mean, the councillor who stood down, who's Karen
Ras.
Karen Ras, yeah. Now, she was a newer face. My understanding is she was also someone who was maybe more willing to ask some questions in council meetings. Is that a fair kind of reflection of her kind of persona on council and stuff like that. She's maybe something of a new look to some of the other councillor members. That this is not what they've been used to in the past. Would that be a fair description?
That would be a fair description. From what I know about former councillor Ras, she was elected in 2014 when the previous councillor stepped down after about 30 years on council. So she was definitely a fresh face. She got elected with about 28% of the vote, which is a very four-way split considering the result back then. There were two other, I guess, very credible challengers, and she managed to squeak past them. And then in 2018, she was re-elected with 93% of the vote. After a period that I remember observing where it was like she was running unopposed, and I thought at one point she would get acclaimed because there was no one registering to run against her until the last second when two random people showed up. So my understanding of the way she approached council meetings was she's always asking very poignant and good questions, such as, like, she would be the only voice asking whether, do we really need this level of middle management in this department here, or do we really need to spend money on this program here? Maybe we could forego that or delay that for a bit and then just try to balance our books for a bit. Like, I mean, technically cities are required by law to balance their budgets every year. But she was still asking questions about fiscal responsibility. She has a conservative, I think, political background. Her husband, Michael Ras, was actually just recently the federal conservative candidate in Mississauga Lakeshore, running under Aaron O'Toole's leadership. But he was not elected. The Liberals managed to hold on to that seat. But nonetheless, that just gives you an indication of where her political leanings would be. Yeah, I think that is a good point, that she was probably one of the few that I observed that would like regularly ask sensible questions. It's not like she was going out of her way to be an opposition voice for the sake of just being an opposition.
Right.
Like, she was trying to at least ask some sensible questions before just rubber stamping or, just going along with the crowd.
Doing what a councillor should do, by the sound of it, which is, have an inquiring mind. But maybe that
I just
goes against
want to
recent history. I don't know.
I just want to jump in and ask a question because we're seeing. You're saying for a while that Mississauga City Council was kind of, everybody gets along and the city council speaks in one voice for a while, and that's kind of been the framework of, I think, most city council. Like it was kind of like an unspoken or a job that you didn't really have to do much in. It was the concept before. But I always suspect that these differences probably always were there. I can't imagine you get 7 people or however many people are on the city council. They're all elected elected with a mandate from the people. Just to say, they're all expected to get along is a little naive, and it might have been maybe a testament to Hazel McCallion's mayoral charisma to keep everyone in balance. I don't know, but I probably just suspects that this was not, that these differences always exist. Now, to say I disagree with you so much, I'm going to vandalize your car after a council meeting, that's a whole other level. And this is clearly, I'm not giving any excuse. It's inexcusable, the behavior. But I just want to just throwing it out there that this has always been there. Is it just, I've noticed, at all levels of government, we've just seen this kind of lack of civility, this lack of kind of respect for the office holder, in their decorum. And it's not just the city council. We've seen it at, the question period in Queen's Park in Ottawa are always, it looks like a schoolyard brawl.
I always tend to, I always tend to think, like, there are parliaments around the world where everybody always agrees, and they tend to be in dictatorships. Like a rowdy parliament or a rowdy council or a rowdy legislature. It's not necessarily a bad sign because it shows that people are allowed to disagree with each other. So I always like to keep that in mind. But I mean, there's obviously a line that can be crossed when you get into this kind of behavior. And I feel like, just having watched a few councils the last few years, that you see these, I mean, we're kind of seeing it, like there was a story last week about Larry Diani, who was like former mayor of Hamilton, former MP, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, still very much involved in Hamilton politics, kind of threatening Hamilton's kind of lone independent journalist, Joey Coleman, saying, I'm going to end your career. You're going to have nothing. Now, this is according to
I did see that
according
tweet,
to Joey,
actually.
Yeah, and it's like these old guys get very. I think because it was kind of a fairly relaxed job for a long time, that municipal politics was very sleepy. No one really took much of and there wasn't a whole lot of controversy.
Yeah.
Now that there is, and people are paying attention, they really don't like it quite.
But the duties of city council are more stringent now. Like, back in the Mike Harris decade, and Ernie Eves, they downloaded a lot of duties to municipalities without giving them like the taxation or really the governing powers to manage that. And I know that the Liberals try and upload some of those responsibilities back to the provincial level, but there's still a lot of tasks that are left at the municipal level that are, it's strenuous. It's no longer a cushy job. They think, oh yeah, Alan, jump in.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know if you wanted to finish your point, but I think your point about Hamilton is interesting because, unlike Mississauga, which is basically a local media desert, I know there are a few ones that popped up recently, but it's not as good as Hamilton, as I understand it. You guys have had the Hamilton Spectator for decades. Joey Coleman does exceptional work, and I think just the presence of that kind of a local media scrutiny has agitated at least Hamilton City Council, or people who used to be in Hamilton City Council, to the degree where a former mayor is now public threatening a local journalist to that point. My point regarding the difference between that and Mississauga is because we've not had that kind of level of local media scrutiny. I mean, I do not recall once where Hazel McCallion had to face a scrum after a council meeting. She's never done that. And it's been like that for decades. It's like, I moved here from Hong Kong in 1990. So I've been a Mississauga resident for about 30 years. And growing up, we always just looked at Hazel McCallion. Oh, she's amazing. Look, she's like, almost like a 100-year-old lady running this city. And I think that's the novelty there, unlike some of the other surrounding 905 municipalities, is that you have this woman at age 57 first became mayor, and then she was still going strong. Like, she had been until recently mayor my entire life. So I knew no other mayor until recently but Hazel McCallion. And,
well, technically, Mississaugan's never knew any other mayor.
Yeah. Her name is on schools. Her name is on other monuments. Like, people just love her because she's everywhere. Like, this woman drives herself around the city at her age. Like, there's a legendary story. It's not, I say legendary because there's no other way to describe it, where she was one time hit by a truck and she got out of the hospital in under 24 hours, and the truck was in the shop for 3 days. So she recovered faster than the truck. So she was like going out to like telling people, yeah, the truck's still in repairs. And that just builds on the mystique of Hazel McCallion, like this figure that's akin to like Ferrero LaGuardia from New York, or, Huey Long, the former governor of Louisiana, or like just these almost larger than life mythical political figures that look like they've always been there. They're serving for life. That's why you see, that's why people think that she is such a great mayor, because council always agreed with her. But my take on it, now that I'm looking back at it, is that she was always ruling with sort of a benevolent iron hand, and managed to because the council around her saw how people loved Hazel tremendously. That this is a woman who gets reelected with 90+% of the vote. Most of the last couple of elections, she really didn't run in, because all she did was put her name on the ballot, told everybody, hey, any money you want to donate to my campaign, just donate it to charity, which is very admirable. But still, there's just nobody running against her. So it's like there was no debate among the citizens about where the direction of the city is going.
And it's meant that there was never any debate about debate whatsoever about the planning Mississauga, as a result, kind of has some problems now.
Yeah, it was around 2010 when I first took notice, because that was around the time where Hazel McCallion was trying to secure this land deal near the city center, which is, if you've been to Mississauga, if you know the area around Square One, where the current Sheridan College campus is. That land, she wanted a hotel/convention center because people believe that big cities need that kind of thing in their downtown. Thing is, the only real estate company that she could find to help broker this deal was owned by her son, Peter. And if you know about Municipal Conflict of Interest 101, that's a huge red flag.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, council finally got off their butts, and a majority of them voted for a public inquiry into the matter. How that story was spun locally was that this was an attack on our beloved Hazel. And I was invited, I remember this, to go to a support Hazel rally because her enemies are attacking her and we need to defend our beloved Hazel. And there were 4 councillors that were supporting Hazel at the time. And then we were given these papers just outlining this gang of 7 or 8, I can't remember the number, of the other councillors that voted for the inquiry. It was almost like looking at mugshots of convicted felons that they were going to do this to our poor Hazel. But, well, in fact, they were just like voting to like be more accountable.
Well, like maybe that's just a sign that it's, the accountability is just now part and parcel at the municipal level, that we need to just accept the fact that this isn't the cakewalk of a job it used to be, or that that perception is out there. I see that we're coming up on 17 minutes of for our first topic. I'm going to say let's take a break for our sponsor, and we'll be right back in a few minutes. Okay, we are back, and we're traveling up the 403. We're traveling up the 403 to from Mississauga all the way up to Brampton now, because Brampton has gotten itself into a little bit of a quagmire, which I'll be honest, I'm drawing a blank on. I don't have all the details on this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, what we do know is in the past week there was kind of a public spat with a number of councillors in Brampton complaining about the use of in-camera meetings, which is a familiar story, as a way to kind of control councillors and to keep awkward stories out of the press about the city manager, or I think he's called the CAO in Brampton, but same job, city manager, who was a controversial figure. And since this kind of council basically came out and said, in-camera meetings are being misused, the mayor's misusing them, he's using it as a way to shut councillors down. What has now happened in the meantime is that the controversial city manager has finally, I believe, resigned or been removed. And I'm just looking to get my details right on exactly which of those two it is. But again, Alan, I mean, you're maybe more familiar with Brampton things than either Joel or I are. What's your take on this story?
My take on Brampton is that I definitely think the local politics are a little more lively than what I've been used to in Mississauga. We've had to have a situation in Mississauga where an extreme event like this car keying incident had to come forward in order for local, even provincial and even national media to pay attention. With Brampton, I always thought, regarding Patrick Brown, he's always been this accidental political figure that dropped into Brampton by accident. Because if you go back to 2018, he started 2018 looking like he was going to become the Premier of Ontario. And then because of alleged sexual assault allegations, he ended up just tumbling from the mountaintop that he was standing on. Mm-hmm. And then dropping into Peel Region. At first, he was going to seek the position of Peel Regional Chair, which was at that time an elected position. But then Doug Ford came in and canceled that election. So at the last minute, he re-registered to run for mayor of Brampton against the then incumbent, Linda Jeffrey. And by the grace of whatever God he might pray to, he ended up winning the election by a squeaker. So I always thought he was a bit of an accidental mayor. But then the optimist in me thinks, okay, maybe like this guy who's had a bit of national ambitions and who's had exposure to several very important files around the province, a lot of which affected Brampton tremendously. He could maybe have some sway, at some point, even though the premier that got elected, in the same year, Doug Ford, at that time probably hated his guts more than anything. This episode regarding the Niagara people that he apparently tried to get into Brampton city government, it's very strange. And I can't really speak on as much as what I understand from the Niagara situation. You might have to get someone from Niagara to come on and help you explain what happened with this David Barrick guy, who is now the former Brampton chief administrative officer / city manager.
Yeah, I mean, there was a whole range of events that happened down in Niagara,
right? But I think
in which the Barrick story was one part. I mean, he ended up being fired, and there was kind of an electoral movement to get him and the kind of group of people who were on the regional council off that council, because they were seen as acting against the interests of, and he was running the conservation authority. And so he got a lost job there, got hired almost immediately in Brampton, and it's like, well, why? Now, certainly we do know that these were, I say political operatives. Probably everybody who's speaking today has been a political operative at some point, but probably at a much lower level than these guys who were kind of PC party insiders, as I understand it, who kind of brought in to run Brampton City Hall. So it's not the way that municipal politics usually works. The apoliticalness of it is kind of like a real thing. It's not just for show. And although mayors and councillors may have been party members or run for provincial or federal government at other times in their career, when they get that job, they tend to take the independence pretty seriously, partly because it really frees you up as someone who's been involved in provincial party campaigns and a campaign as a candidate. It's so much more fun being a councillor because you can say what you want. You don't have to worry. But it seemed like kind of politicization of City Hall. Well, I mean, certainly I think that's the accusations being made, and that they were kind of running it like on a kind of more partisan basis than would maybe be traditional. I mean, he's gone now. This is David Barrick, the controversial figure. I think he was removed last week, and I mean the questions which will remain now will be about Patrick Brown's kind of staking his reputation on this story at the outset, and kind of his judgment in bringing this person in. What strikes me as amazing about this story is the blatant nepotism that's involved here. It comes into the reason why Barrick got the job, according to all reports, is he was buddies with Patrick Brown. There's what gets me is it's an old Tammany Hall politics. It's that old, just I know a guy, I know somebody who can help me out. I want people I can trust around me, and this might be a bit partisan, and I might be put on a bit more of my progressive hat here, but it's something that we see a lot with conservative politicians. Is I don't trust anyone outside of my circle. Therefore, I need to have people I trust in positions of power around me that I can rely on. Rules be damned. I just want to go. And we see it at the federal, provincial, and now apparently at the municipal level. That's my take on it. I could be wrong.
And I think that speaks to the whole idea that Patrick Brown fundamentally is this outsider. Like, he cut his municipal teeth in Barrie, which is completely different jurisdiction from Brampton. You bring up the fact that David Barrick had very zero to little experience. It's amazing that a big city like Brampton, to manage Canada's 9th largest city, you pick somebody that had no experience managing a department, let alone a city of that scale. Like, he was managing a conservation authority for a regional government that was about less than 500,000 people. So it's like, I'm just curious. I don't know if it's just the Patrick Brown factor that factored into hiring this guy, but it seemed like Brampton wasn't able to hire an experienced and seasoned administrator in order to oversee some important files. There's a lot of important files. Brampton's dealing with. The university, downtown redevelopment, LRT, if they can possibly revive that boondoggle. There's just a lot of these things. And Patrick Brown, in the last 4 years, has touted that he's managed to keep 0% tax increases in the city budget. Well, how does that affect infrastructure funding? How does that affect other things that you need to spend money
here's the
on?
thing. That's not a big victory to. That's not a. That's not
something to be proud of.
That's the thing. Like, it's not really difficult to keep property taxes at like a 0% increase. Like, keep it where they are. Usually, you just say, okay, let's keep the budget where it's at, and you budget accordingly to fund things over the long term, and you ask the province for money to fill in the gaps where it need be. But I want to go back to what you were talking about. That it kind of shows like the importance of keeping these positions not political, because you want somebody in that position who knows the city, knows the ins and outs of the bureaucracy of the city, knows the culture of the city, knows who, because as much as you want to keep it unpolitical, it is political. So you want somebody who would know. You need to talk with this community over here if you want to win this, or this business over here. You need them on your side. You can't just trust. Oh, my buddy's got my back, so we're gonna go take on the world together. That's not how this works. You need somebody who on day one can say, okay, I'm going to set you up a meeting with person A, person B, and person C because we want to get this done. And then I'm going to sit you down with this group of people because we need to talk about this issue that's on your agenda. I find that this stuff often goes into some kind of amateur hour theatrics that often just ends up, it makes the in this case, the mayor look bad. It makes the city council look frustrated, and ultimately just wastes taxpayers' time and money having to deal with this. Especially when, like, Brampton, I just want to finish my point. Brampton needs a lot of things, especially with COVID. They've been fighting for a proper hospital, a proper healthcare center for years now. And if this pandemic has shown anything, it's that they need that massive piece of infrastructure for that city. That's they shouldn't be fighting over this. They should be fighting or just going to the province saying, give us the money to build us the damn hospital. Brampton is a big city. Bringing someone in who's never held any significant role in municipal government to be your city manager or CEO is it's risky at best. And basically, to pick someone who's a party loyalist, who's therefore seen as a loyalist to Patrick Brown, over someone who's just qualified to do the darn job, is, I think, a big mistake. And Patrick Brown did have some municipal experience. He should have known better, but he very much came in as the PC former MP and MPP, rather than coming in as someone with a kind of municipal, who knows how the municipal city system works, which is so fundamentally different from any other level of government. So I think it illustrates a whole bunch of problems. It also illustrates the problems of having a council with new members who are inexperienced, and I think they got bounced into. The city manager or the CEO in Brampton's case is something that the councillors will have voted on, and the mayor only gets one vote, so he couldn't be hired without the other councillors supporting that. But I think I know there were some stories last year about people feeling that they kind of got bounced into it literally in their first week or so of being in the job, and not feeling that they maybe should get in the way of the new mayor too much. And actually, I was going to ask. What about? I feel kind of somewhat sorry for Linda Jeffrey, who if nothing, just because she never seemed to come across my radar very much, seemed fairly blameless as mayor, and yet got booted out fairly unceremoniously for someone who kind of dropped in at the last minute. Like, well, all my other jobs have gone away, so I guess I better run for this one. It seemed kind of unfair. Do you know, Alan, anything about whether is Linda Jeffrey thinking of coming back? Is she still kind of involved in Brampton politics at all?
My understanding is that, this is just what I heard. This is not like actual confirmed information. I heard she's no longer living in Brampton, so I don't think she has that much investment in the city anymore. Regarding Linda Jeffrey, I think is also got politically lucky because she was elected in 2014 after a stint as a McGuinty-era cabinet minister. She came in on the heels of the former mayor, Susan Fennell, who was running for re-election, but because of, I believe, Sam Graywall, you've had him on your pod, he reported at the time of Susan Fennell's excessive spending scandals in the city of Brampton. And by that luck, Linda Jeffrey managed to come in and become the fresh face that people really wanted, because eventually Susan Fennell ended up in third place in that re-election attempt. So Linda Jeffrey also kind of came in on a wave of political luck. But the problem is Linda Jeffrey was facing a council with years of experience. She didn't come in with, unlike Patrick Brown, with a wave of new councillors coming in alongside him. So Linda Jeffrey had to face down experienced council members. And that kind of explains issues like why, like the LRT, which was originally slated to go to downtown Brampton, but instead got cut off at Steeles Avenue because the council at the time decided, we don't really want 100% provincial funding for this because we're going to ruin a precious downtown where all the big moneyed houses are lining along the streets. Bill Davis's house is there. Oh, poor Bill. No offense to the late great Bill Davis, but that was Linda Jeffrey's problem. She was facing an experienced council that kind of was able to push back against her, even though she is the mayor, even though she's just one vote. Patrick Brown came in with a bunch of rookie councillors that really probably didn't know the rules. And I think that's what the main root of the problem is that led up to what Brampton City Council recently did. Because these guys didn't know the rules. So Patrick Brown thought maybe I could just sneak in and make up his own procedures. That's why I managed to hire my friend David Barrick. David Barrick, in turn, circumvented the usual council rules and procedures in order to hire people who are not qualified, even though positions that require an engineering degree were given to people without an engineering degree at all, or other procedures that were just circumvented, or access to information was now circulated to the CAO's office, which has never been done before. These are things that have never been done before. So that's led up to this point where council finally pushed back after just not only Barrick being an obstacle, but Brown himself, even in-camera meetings that was reported that even during in-camera meetings, he was not allowing motions to come forward by the councillors who were asking for motions to be voted on. So that's why you've gotten like this joint letter released by a majority of council saying this is being run like a dictatorship. This is why like Patrick Brown is somehow becoming an authoritarian figure. I mean, that sounds like really extreme language, but that's the way it's been happening. And it really depends on, I think, at the end of the day, different personalities as well, because Patrick Brown is a different type of personality. Hazel McCallion had her own way to deal with it. I mean, council basically obeyed her because she was so beloved. And I think in Brampton's current case, Patrick Brown is just trying to maybe take advantage of the rules and procedures in order to try to get council to go along with what he wants to do. And only difference is council has now finally wised up and decided to push back.
Yeah, as I say, it's kind of blown up in his face if that was the deal, because, well, assuming he carries on as mayor after the municipal election, he seems to have made quite a lot of enemies, and it's difficult to get that back once you've done it. But let's we've got a couple of minutes left, and there's a story closer to Joel's and my kind of area of greatest familiarity. Provincial. The Premier made a trip to Hamilton today, Joel. What was all that about? What brought him to somewhere that he doesn't have a lot of seats usually?
Someplace I'm sure he held his breath as he drove through. So the Premier was in Hamilton to announce a $500 million boost for ArcelorMittal Dofasco, basically to produce green steel, which sounds kind of gross, but it's actually it's actually a good thing. Basically, it's $500 million from the province to give the former Dofasco site a chance to reinvest and upgrade its technology so that it makes steel or makes products using less CO2. Because it turns out Hamilton is one of the worst per capita emitters in the GTHA. And a lot of that comes from the steel plants in Hamilton. No surprise there. So this is going to go a long way to help greenifying a major industry in Hamilton, which is great. What I thought was interesting is the premier kept talking about this in terms of going into the auto sector, into electric vehicles, which I'm sure it will. But I thought that if you're making greener steel, I mean, it has other options than just automobile manufacturing, but that's good too. But it just seemed like there's a lot of notes happening in this announcement. One, why announce it now? Like the entire province is on edge with what's happening in Ottawa and what happened recently at the Windsor crossing. Like the province is very much on shaky grounds. They just announced that they're going to remove vaccine mandates come March 1, which has a lot of people on edge already. Why announce this now? It almost seems like he's trying to do the age-old politician gambit of, I'm going to throw as much into the news as possible to just confuse the heck out of people, to keep everybody off guard, so nobody can focus on any one story and give me any one sector of criticism.
I mean, I guess usually at this time in the sort of electoral cycle, this is the perfect couple of months before the election story. Mm-hmm. And to an extent, I'm not going to criticize any government for trying to time things right. It always strikes me as a little, goodness knows, politicians are the best people at making these claims. The Conservatives used to say about the Liberals all the time. I'm sure the Liberals will say about the Conservatives, you're just buying votes. It's like, well, if you're buying votes by doing things that people like and that are popular, isn't that what politicians are supposed to do?
Yeah.
Do things that people want them to do. That's kind of how democracy works. So I don't necessarily see why a government can't do things that people like, and I kind of get why they do them at times when it helps them. However, you're right that it's to an extent that he's risking the whole thing getting buried under 20 other news stories about trucks parked on.
That's the thing. I thought this was completely stupid on his part, and it's not. I mean, it's a good story. This is a winner. This is a story that I look at it, I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to see from my Ontario government. However, I also want to see that blockade of truckers in Ottawa taken care of, and that sorted out as well. Like it's just. It didn't reek of a commitment of updating Ontario industry. To me, it reeked of, I need somebody to not. I want somebody to talk positive about me in the media, as opposed to the criticism that I've been getting for going on a snowmobile trail when the people of Ottawa are in crisis. It reeked of a double standard in my book. What I also find interesting is the green energy, the EV car push, right? He wants to make Ontario into this EV car manufacturing mecca of North America, which is great. I'm all for that. Yet he also canceled the Green Energy Act, and then he canceled all the green energy rebates for people who wanted to buy electric vehicles in this province, and basically has kiboshed, electrifying like the 401, all the en routes there. All this time we could have been putting in all sorts of infrastructure to help support EV cars. All of a sudden, now we got to play catch up, because he kind of realized, oh, hey, that's where GM, Chrysler, and Ford are all headed. I mean, that's right now. If you look on any of their upcoming 2022, 23 lines, it's all EV vehicles, and it's just like Ford all of a sudden realized, oh my gosh, that was the future. The previous premier had a kind of an idea. It was a good idea. Maybe I should get on.
Well, it would be nice if he had enough grace to recognize that. I mean, which of course he doesn't. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's like what he's putting back in place now in 2022 is a fraction of what he took away in 2000 in the second half of 2018.
What goads me about this whole story is the fact that, I mean, we had on the podcast Flavio Volpe of the APMA, who their Project Arrow, which is they're hoping is going to reinvigorate the Canadian auto manufacturing industry, which I hope it does, because it'll have a ton of benefits for the 905 region. But I mean, that's being led by the industry. The premier wants to come in kind of as this visionary, and I'd say, hey, this is a good story. I'm not going to lie, but what is the strategy? Is it just give a bunch of money because somebody says, yeah, we need to make our product greener? Like, that's a strategy.
And with steel, I mean, the steel industry is still, although it's a shadow of its former self in Hamilton, it's still an important employer, and it's still one of the big steel manufacturers in North America, as far as I understand. Mm-hmm. But steel. Did they make? I mean, and I haven't checked out the story myself. I'm depending on what you know. But when they say the steel is going to be greener, I mean, what do they mean? I mean, like steel is made with coke and not Coca-Cola, or not.
It's not
cocaine,
it's not,
but
no, it's coal. It's not going to be made with coal. It's essentially these gigantic furnaces that are made with, I'm going to say it like electricity. Now, yeah, I mean, they use it with electricity that heats up a furnace to a necessary degree, and they're able to mold the steel into what it needs to be. Before that, the plants were spewing out plumes of smoke. That was all coal smoke. That was the CO2 that was being spewed in the atmosphere. In theory, that goes away. Like this decision will drastically reshape the Hamilton landscape. Literally, like when you go over the Skyway, you're not going to see plumes of smoke coming out of Dofasco anymore. You might see nothing. I don't know the technicalities of how it'll work, but that's the premise, is that you're going to switch from these coal fire furnaces into like these gigantic electric power that will draw from the clean energy of the Ontario grid. All those wind turbines that Doug Ford's people supported were all saying, how tear them down. How dare you build these windmills in our backyard? Well, that's going to fuel Hamilton's transformation, apparently. Ironic. Yeah.
People could probably, perhaps rightly, accuse me of a little bit of bias here, just from my time as a volunteer. One of the things that the previous Ontario government always claimed, I'm not saying it's true, you can go check the facts for yourself or not, was that they had transformed the grid pretty significantly. We're getting rid of coal-fired power stations, getting rid of... so basically what we have with the steelworks are coal-powered steel factories. They're generating their own power because they're actually creating the furnaces in that kind of old school way. So yeah, I mean, it's like Ontario does, compared with most of its neighbouring jurisdictions, with the exception of Quebec, have an extremely a far more modern, a far cleaner power grid. So I mean, these are all good things. But again, the bill, the fact that they would have us believe that before 2018 everything was a disaster, and there were no sort of good news stories, is going to be somewhat irksome sometimes. But I mean, I do admit my biases there. Everybody listening.
I just look at this. I mean, it's a good story. I'm not going to lie. I think good on the premier for doing it.
Yeah, I mean,
I question if does he? Is it now the province is still on edge? Big time. Like now to come in with this, oh yeah, we're going to have this great story. It's like, why now? Is it because like you just given up on these other crises that we're having? Which I'm getting the sense that's what it is. It's the Ottawa situation is now Justin Trudeau's problem, because Justin Trudeau enacted the Emergencies Act. And he's saying, no, we're giving up on COVID too, because the vaccine mandates are ending on March 1st. And that presumably the mask mandates will follow at some point later. I think he's just...
And I'm understanding his announcement was very much that we're giving up on this now, we're done.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to get into that today. It's so much more of a national story than a 905 one. But
no, but it's I think
for those of us who've done our time and did everything that was asked of us, it's a kick in the teeth to basically be told, oh, we're going to give pretty much everything that these morons have been asking for.
Yep.
But we don't have time for that today. I don't think.
So why don't we leave this episode on that note? I'm gonna call it quits for the day. Gonna have a drink.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Alan, for joining us and giving us some really good information about to add to our the picture in Peel. And we'll be back next week, everybody, with another episode of the 905er.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.